Today, we'll be hearing from Malaysia's ecosystem from all corners. Please put your hands together for Fadzli Shah of the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation and his panel, The Journey of Malaysia, Navigating the Uncharted. Thank you very much.
Do we go up?
Thank you.
Do we just go up? Sorry.
Wow. Hello and good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to say that, personally for me, I'm having such a great time at this conference because, if you look at the level of energy at 4:15 on a Friday afternoon, people are still committed to here. So, first and foremost, I want to thank the organizers, especially Smart Nation, for having us. It's the first year, I believe, that Smart Nation is highlighting the ecosystems that exist outside of Singapore. So I think we're honored to represent Malaysia on that front. And I think if you just allow me, as an introduction, I represent MDEC, Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. And our mandate really is to lead the national digital agenda back home in Malaysia. It's been a 23-year journey for us. We started from a plot of land, basically palm oil plantations that we've then transformed into Cyberjaya. So from a very nascent geographical economy, we've transformed it to what I would think now is a much more mature ecosystem. But we don't stop there, right? So we continue to evolve over time, and I'm so honored to be hosting 3 of the success stories that we have in Malaysia, not just from the startup sector, but also from the corporate sector. And as we continue to evolve, we at MDEC really see our role as 4 key pillars of movement. Number 1, that we continue to connect the private sector with the public sector, because that's our role as a government agency, to be kind of the bridge between the 2 driving forces of the economy. Number 2, to really catalyze the digital adoption, to make sure that whatever great companies like yourselves create, our people can adopt and be part of that, and ultimately, earn economic benefit from. But how we do that, we continue to actually commercialize for our entrepreneurs, yeah? And we do that through pools of community, and that really gives us a great opening into the first one, which I think from all of the 3 perspectives, and as you'll introduce yourselves, we really believe it's about community, about giving our communities that visibility, and today maybe share a little bit about how we have, as a country, driven the digital agenda and been a front runner for ASEAN over the last couple of decades. So let me introduce my panel, and I think then maybe we can dive right into it and share a little bit about your journeys. Chris from Softspace, Khairil from Axiata, and ST from Sunway. So maybe, ST, I can start with you. Sunway is not a new company. You guys are a developer. You've been around for a while, but you're heavily into digital now. So maybe you can help us really understand that journey, how that's been for you.
Sure, yeah, thanks. So let me just start off a little intro about Sunway. So in Sunway, for those who do not know, we are one of the largest diversified conglomerates in Malaysia, where uniquely we build, own, and operate an entire city, yeah? And the different components within the city, which includes 2 universities, theme parks, hotels, one of the largest malls in Malaysia, and the whole ecosystem around it, right? So over the 43 years of building this offline ecosystem that we have, we came to the realization that offline can't stay offline forever, and we also know that online can't stay online forever, right? So we project that there's this O2O, online-offline interaction, and hence we said, I think we need to invest into the digital ecosystem and the digital economy to marry this offline and online ecosystem together, right? So in Sunway, we took a few paths because there's no one silver bullet that we feel will get us to digital. So we have Sunway Ventures, which is a corporate venture capital and venture builder within the group. And then we have Sunway iLabs, which is our accelerator and incubator arm. And thereafter, we started venturing into VC play. So we have Sunseed Capital, a Series A, Series B, a regional fund together with KK Fund. And recently, we launched, together with MAVCAP and GoB, the Malaysian Super Seed Fund as well. So we are continuously going into a venture building, corporate venture capital, or VC model as a front together, right? So that's what we are doing, and we continue to do more.
So that's interesting because right next to you we have Khairil. You guys are also builders, maybe not building buildings, but you've been, Axiata is synonymous with telecommunications Malaysia. You really built the infrastructure that we're now riding on for mobile and soon 5G, and that's evolved not just from a infrastructural telco play to now you guys are heavily into digital. Maybe you can share a little bit with us about how that transformation has been for you.
So yeah, thanks very much, and thank you very much for the organizers for having us here. Very honored to be here. I think the story of Axiata was one where we realized, this was sort of early in around this decade, where that telco as an industry, there's sort of infrastructure futures around it, but it's also sitting on a lot of assets that digital economies, digital companies can actually leverage. And so we went about a journey to kind of build this. Axiata Digital, when we started out, this was sort of late 2012, early 2013. We had a mandate. This was essentially an R&D unit. So we were experimenting with a lot of things to kind of participate in the digital economy. But it was only around 2014, 2015 that we decided that actually, you know what, let's now venture build, if you like, right? Sort of build businesses that actually leverages what we are seeing in terms of the evolution of digital and the assets that we had as a telco. And I think all of you know kind of what kind of assets that a telco will have, right? Massive retail distribution footprint, a lot of insights about the customers. And so throughout that period, we deployed probably around $250 million in capital into various businesses, right? So at one stage, we owned e-commerce businesses in Indonesia, in Malaysia. We had health businesses in Sri Lanka, et cetera, et cetera. I think then came a period where we then said, okay, well, we know what we're very good at and what we're not so good at, and we know what are businesses that really does leverage the core telco assets. And so then we pivoted into kind of, if you like, our current phase where it's really focused around three major pillars. One around financial services, one around advertising tech, and then the last one being our API gateway business that we've now kind of built into a global business. So that's the journey that we've been through so far. I think, in short, we are very excited kind of where these businesses are going. It's not the end of our trajectory for sure, but we're looking forward to sort of the next venture build that we're gonna participate in.
Yeah, so I want to come back to that in a little bit because you guys have really built upon like a foundation that has existed for a couple of decades in your individual companies. But let's talk about building from scratch, right? Yep. The real challenger businesses. So Chris from Softspace, I mean, you guys have had a tremendous journey. I believe like within the span of, what is it, like less than the last decade, like Correct. 7 years? Correct, 7 years. You guys are now four yep. plus. So what has that been like for you, like when you guys entered the FinTech space, being based out of Malaysia?
Actually, when we first started, we are a payments company. When we looked into it, we decided whether we should be a B2B or a B2C company. But when we look into Malaysia as a perspective, we feel that there is a wave of transformation over the digitization of financial institutions. So we decided that the fastest way for us to grow is actually to become an infrastructure player and to provide infrastructure services, payment infrastructure services to financial institutions. We managed to actually close about 20 of the top banks in Asia. And at the moment now, we are looking to expand to Japan. And when everyone asks us, why Japan? Japan is such a high-tech country where they must have changed a very efficient financial infrastructure. But again, we realize that in developed countries where there's a trust system is very high, then they tend to use more cash. They are okay to use cash. And Japan, even though it's a very high-tech country, they use a lot of cash. And the way we look into it in general is that we provide a low-cost payment solution. And that payment solution for us in general is to collect data and to assist banks and say, look, you have a bunch of data, consumer payments data. How can you use those data for other kinds of services? At the moment now, the way they are structuring themselves is not efficient, and the way we are doing it for them in general is, okay, you have the payment infrastructure, can we do unified commerce with regards to sharing online to offline, and we provide that platform for them. And it's been a tough journey, and to be honest, we didn't start in, our first customer was not a Malaysian bank, it's actually a Thai bank. But again, it's also a good circumstances that we are in, because once you go out, you know what is the ecosystem outside, what are the challenges, how much localization you need to do. And gradually we came back, and we are quite active in Malaysia, Thailand, Taiwan, and also going to Japan and Indonesia.
So that's interesting for me, because as you journey into Japan, right, coming from previously the venture capital scene, the majority of inbound money is coming from America and of course, largely Japan. So when I look at the journey of something, Softspace or Axiata or Sunway, you guys haven't taken the same path. When we look at like funding that's really required to push this forward, I would like to kind of maybe pick your brains on what does it take? Like, how do you guys continue to experiment? And is it venture building? Is it actual, I think like Sunway, you guys have looked into, I think now you've closed with 2 funds where you're actually investing in 2 funds. And then Axiata look with a venture builder approach, but also coexisting with a fund, right, in parallel. So what does that look like for you? Like being based out of Malaysia, how's the funding ecosystem play out?
Now, it depends on how you want to see this. So the funding, I think, is getting there. You know, there's more. I think the corporates are waking up. With Sunway as Axiata trying to drive the change. We realized that, I mean, the old school of thinking is to build on your own. But I think we do see value in trying to work with startups, right? And of course, then you want to invest in them. And using a venture capital model, it's actually very helpful because you get a breadth, right? And not only just in Malaysia, but at least in the region. But how we on Sunway would love to work with all the startups and VCs is really to say, how can we build an ecosystem around to make our city a little smarter, right? And there's, again, no one silver bullet. So every smart city needs some sort of mobility, some FinTech, some digital media, and said, okay, let's invest in them and bring them in and make Sunway a kind of a test bed, right? We have 30,000 students at any one time. It's an ideal test bed for anyone that wants to get there, right? And along with the different businesses. And so we invest in things that we can use ourselves, right? So that we also add value not only from a balance sheet perspective, but from a P&L perspective, right? And that's where we want to also help mentor and grow the startups. Because on the other side, we believe in sustainable development, and also our students, our 30,000 strong students nowadays wants to get into entrepreneurship, right? But they always ask us, what are good startups to go to, right? And that's something that we want to also expose them. So things that we invest in, we also say, hey, can we add our resources, our whole education arm, and the students to back it up as well, right? So kind of like smart money, that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, but we can lead with that, right? At the end of the day, if you look at the thesis of investing, it has to have some sort of outcome. And I think this is where Axiata has had, and congratulations, by the way, a very recent experience where I think you guys invested, you built, and you actually saw the exit potential happen. Could you share a little bit with that?
So I think for us it's a slightly different situation from Sunway or maybe some of the other GLCs and large companies in Malaysia. I think for us it's because we're actually very regional with our presence, and therefore there is an investment thesis to be putting money behind some of the companies that we've built out. Right? I mean, we've been quite fortunate that to give you some examples, our microinsurance business, we receive funding from Allianz to the tune of 90 million. This was about 2 years ago. Our ad tech business, we were able to raise 35 million from investors abroad. And then most recently, the the unit that, the holding company, Axiata Digital itself, we receive investors from abroad as well. And that's because we do have quite a large footprint. I think what you were referring to was a set of companies that we had built, and they've been fairly successful. We were realizing that we probably, as a corporate, were not the right homes for these companies, and so we packaged them into what we call our digital ventures unit, and then we've since exited that to a PE fund here in Singapore, and we made a lot of good money around that, right? So there is sort of a path to exit for a lot of the corporates. But I want to pick up on one of the points that you said, which is actually for pure Malaysian companies. I think, and some of us here are kind of in that situation as well, where it's actually very hard to raise money beyond a certain level. So, seed funding, writing a 500,000 US dollars check, even up to kind of 1-2 million, that's actually relatively easy. Once you get beyond that, it becomes quite challenging. Right. And that's why Axiata Digital, one of the things that we did, and this was about 4 years ago, we set up this fund called Axiata Digital Innovation Fund, ADIF for short, and that was very much targeted at A and B rounds, writing checks to up to kind of 20 million ringgit, not US dollars, to kind of help companies grow. And that's to kind of plug in that hole that we see for a lot of very interesting companies, because you're right, there is actually a lot of challenge for local Malaysian companies, local Malaysian startups to attract money from abroad, largely because, when they look at Malaysia, what is Malaysia, right? It's not a big enough market like Indonesia to attract the funds. And so it's very hard for us to kind of go out and talk to the big brands to tell them to come in and look at some of the companies that we have built.
Excellent point. Yep. And to challenge Axiata's growth, because they had a running start.
Correct.
You have actually been able to very successfully raise multiple rounds, especially from overseas investors, yep. Right? Maybe you can share a little bit with us, like, how do investors view you as a company that's based in Malaysia and now expanding out of it?
Actually, my point of view in general, of course, as entrepreneurs, we need to make do with whatever ecosystem or circumstances that we are in. When we look into the whole ecosystem, we know for a fact, and that was before Axiata has its own fund, Sunway has its own fund, and we know that raising money is kind of going to be difficult because of the positioning of the country. It's not as large as Indonesia. So we look into it and say, what can we do? We know for a fact that Malaysia is a very good test bed. We need to scale immediately. So we immediately scale through there. And we use Malaysia as a way to get good talent. We are in Taiwan, and we can go to Taiwan and sell our solution and to project ourselves. And because a lot of Malaysians can speak multi-languages, so we can go Indonesia, Taiwan, and whatsoever. So that's one strength. And in general, Malaysia as an ecosystem or as a country, they have a lot of opportunities. A lot of problems, hence a lot of opportunities. We look into the banking infrastructure, the whole merchants infrastructures that they have is definitely not efficient. And we used it as a basis to grow and gain traction and to test our solution. And a lot of times when we test our solution, it offers very unique insights that can allow us to scale out of Malaysia. I'll give you an example. Malaysia, for the longest time, since 1980s, is very famous for credit card fraud. So the banking system, the whole credit card system, they have very thorough fraud management system. They're very conservative. Before they want to adopt your solution, they must make sure that you have all the other checklists before you can do that. And when we apply and make sense of all these criteria, a lot of times it exceeds the criteria of other banks. And we have a lot more. And it became a very good place for us to struggle. And through that struggle, we built a better product and we scale. And hence why we receive mostly funding from overseas, in Japan, for example. And hence the Japanese appreciate the quality of the product because of that struggle.
So do you think that's what it takes to build a high quality product tested across several demographics that can effectively scale, right? And I think maybe also because my boss is here, right? So our CEO of MDEC is also here in the crowd. For me to take home some notes, right? What has to happen next? Because I think Peter Drucker said that there's a difference between being efficient, which is doing things right, and being effective, which is doing the right things. And as we see technology being very pervasive, and at the end of the day, it comes down to the user, right?
Correct.
Like is there a future where technology just makes the rich richer and then the wealth gap just expands? Or as we think about ASEAN as a trading bloc, do countries like Malaysia have to take a lead and showcase like how do you do it effectively so that we as a bloc of 10 countries in ASEAN become a powerhouse of an economy?
If I look into it in general, how do we tackle those things? I would think that Malaysia is very good in general. If you look into Malaysia, a lot of startups, and I mentor a lot of startups, they want to focus on KL, Penang, and the big cities. But those, what we call in Malaysia is the bangsa population. What it means is that it's people with internet access, they watch Netflix, they do that. That, unfortunately, is not the population or the majority of the population in Malaysia. And you know what? It's also not the majority of people in Southeast Asia. It's very different from what happens in Singapore and in the cities. So I will feel that in general, there's a lot of opportunities to actually understand the user. And actually, when you want to understand the user, I'm a born skeptic in the sense that when I want to understand a user, I want to understand the best of that particular user. And I also want to understand the worst of that particular user. Because at the end of the day, if you want to do financing as well, Malaysians are very creative in trying to game the system. So hence why when you offer a solution, then you will be able to make it more efficient on a cost perspective and revenue perspective, and then you can launch those kind of things. I think that's where the whole thing about how we can do that in terms of agri-tech, Malaysian SMEs is 90%, I think 80-90% are not digitized. Those are things that you can tackle. Once you tackle that, then you have a great SOP to scale. And I think that we can actually do that as a country.
Yeah. Khairil, I would actually challenge you because you guys, as Axiata, with presence across so many countries, right? Looking at, as Chris shared, it's not about the bangsa user that has it all and is now starting and it's already living the digital life. It's beyond that. Across ASEAN, we have a huge distribution of, these personas of users. How do you look at that? Like, how does Axiata look at getting it into the hands of people, getting it at scale?
I think that's a brilliant point because I think it's, if I look at Malaysia, and we use Malaysia as our test bed in terms of all the businesses that we've rolled out. And that's because we have this amazing dichotomy. On the one hand, you have the, as you call them, the bangsa population, right? The very rich, high net worth individuals, all of them owning smartphones, all of them very, very digital savvy. Even the youth within that sort of segment, very, very digital savvy. And then you have kind of the extremes as well, right? How do you build products, digital products that serves the underserved completely? And so that's why we like Malaysia in that sense because we are able to do that. We're able to do a lot of these experimentation. So if I think about kind of our micro-lending business, right? Micro-lending business is designed largely for these underserved, right? And I think a lot of people talked about it, and obviously we're doing it as well, which is we're taking a lot of the data that we collect from both our financial services business as well as the telco, and then trying to figure out whether these guys are creditworthy or not. That's not targeted to the bangsa crowd because the bangsa crowd can walk into a bank and get a loan. These are folks who are running, maybe for the Singaporeans in the crowd, it's probably like a store in your Adam Road Hawker Center, right? And they're looking for a loan that is no more than $800-900 in size. They walk into a bank. Banks generally don't serve them because the net interest income on a $900 loan is not even enough to cover the loan officer. And so we've built technology to be able to do that. And so I like the fact that we're in Malaysia. I like the fact that we have this team of data scientists, this team of venture builders kind of going out there because the market is so accessible to us. And we see such a wide range of market in a small geography that allows us to experiment very quickly, build our products, test it very quickly, and then get the results very quickly. To then think about rolling it out in places like, to some extent, Singapore, in Indonesia, where there's a very large sort of underserved market as well, and various parts of the Axiata footprint.
So I like when you say like test it with the market, right? Because I think in Sunway you have an entire city, as you shared, that you can continue to experiment with. How does that look like? Are there some trends that you're seeing which are coming up? Or like, are you guys experimenting with smart cities? And again, coming back to Khairil's point just now about really collecting and harnessing data, how are you guys viewing that in kind of like the next 5-10 year horizon? What's in there for Sunway?
I think for us, I think, again, we want to be a model sustainable smart city, right? And what that means is, firstly, a lot of partnerships, you know, in terms of market access and so forth, getting the right startups, the right money into it, and trying to see how everyone can work together, right? So firstly, I think it's the whole infrastructure that needs to happen, right? Also, so we do a lot of joint investments to you know, like say the accessibility, right? Putting free Wi-Fi, you know, fibering the whole city and so forth. Then building up, you know, to, for example, we just partnered with the United Nations Technology Innovation Labs. So for example, like you know, if you want to solve from you know, sustainable fashion to financial inclusion and all, at least that gives you a launch pad to, you know, to the different similar markets, developing markets out there as well, right? Because to some, they think that Malaysian markets are very small, but at least it's a test bed that you can get out, right? We also recently, like for example, tie up with University of California, Berkeley, for example, Harvard, Oxford, to bring in the external tech element, you know, the knowledge as well. So we are like, we believe that a mixing, a pot, right, of mentorship, money, right, markets, could really help facilitate that. And now that where that heads to is like, you know, as we go along, we hopefully then can build more IPs, right, and build more entrepreneurs to then feed the other entrepreneurs, and that's how normally the circle goes, right, as it continue to grow up. And you see more success stories, right, startups can work with corporates and, you know, having good exits, right, and that's where we want to do that snowball effect, right, and working with you know, partners to do so.
Okay, great. I think really to close off, I just want to say, on behalf of MDEC, number one, thank you all for being on the panel. And I like what you said, which is that you guys are experimenting with city and really trying to help this scale up. And again, I think in each of your own rights, working with either a city or the multiple countries where you already have a breadth of user base, and then of course, you know, hustling it through at the frontier to kind of go into your fifth country, hopefully soon.
Yep.
Good luck with that. We at MDEC are committed to helping our companies from Malaysia start, grow, expand, because as you said, 30 million is all relative. When we look at the ASEAN population, it's a test bed, and then we scale, right? So I would like to wish all of you the very best of luck in the future endeavors and as you grow your businesses. And of course, we, as Malaysia, are open for business. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Message received loud and clear. Thank you very much.